Now, as automotive enthusiasts, we are biologically predetermined to like the Land Rover Defender. I mean, it's one of the most capable vehicles that you could take from the factory floor and just go and climb a mountain with no modifications whatsoever. It's a fantastic vehicle, and the fact that its design didn't change for decades and decades is a testimony to how they got it right the first time. It has been a staple of the off-roading and 4x4 community since day dot. But obviously that vehicle's not in production anymore, and whilst the new Defender shares its ethos, it's maybe not quite as farm ready. I don't know, we can't wait to drive it. So in that regard, if you're looking to buy a new super rugged all-terrain vehicle, your choices are actually fairly limited. But I suppose the Defender's absence certainly opens the door for things like this, the new Jeep Wrangler, or specifically the Rubicon, this vehicle in its most rugged specification. People who maybe wouldn't have considered a Jeep because they were Land Rover loyalists. It's sort of a shame, because this is definitely worth some consideration. Now, those of you who are about to comment how dirty this car is and how I should have cleaned it before filming, know that 20 minutes after delivery I was doing this with it. And frankly, a clean Jeep is more of a posing pouch for somebody who's maybe compensating for something, whereas a dirty Jeep signifies to the world that you've been using it for what it's been designed for. It looks purposeful with mud all over it, and so I haven't bothered to clean it, because it is as God intended a Jeep to be, coated in mud. Anyway, whilst we're talking about the appearance of the vehicle, this Jeep Wrangler Rubicon was going to go one of two ways when I first saw it on my driveway. Either public opinion was going to be lots of rude hand gestures and people not letting me out of junctions, or people were going to get it. And thankfully, in the realm of public opinion, it was the latter. People really like this. I thought it was going to be a bit too ostentatious, a bit too American, especially in Rubicon spec with its big wide square wheel arches and in bright red as well. It certainly is not a vehicle to take to a funeral. But people really like it. Thumbs up, people take pictures of it when it's parked. And down on the south coast, where, to be frank, the most exciting thing that happened recently was the Second World War, it's become a bit of a local celebrity in the supermarkets around and parked up in the street. I really like it. It's loud, it's proud, it's quite American, obviously. But yeah, it has a core sense of purpose to its design. Nothing is here for flamboyance. It's all purposeful, and I think, yeah, when you look at it, people sort of register that on a subconscious level, and I think that's why in a wider spectrum of people, even non-car people, they sort of quite like it and smile as it goes by. But as I say, this car is all about function. You've got a nice high 30-inch wading depth on this car. You've got some of the knobbliest tyres I've seen on a road production vehicle from the factory. You've got the widened track. There's a lot of capability in this car, even just from what you can see visually. And whenever you get into the nitty-gritty of the mechanicals, I mean, what you have at your disposal is practically everything you need to get yourself unstuck from a very muddy, sludgy swamp. Under the bonnet of this four-door Rubicon is a 2.2 litre diesel engine with 197 brake horsepower and 450 newton meters of torque. Now, the two most useless figures I can give you about this vehicle is that it'll do 0 to 62 in about 10.3 seconds and has a top speed of around 99 miles per hour. Now, they're useless because basically this car's either going to be crawling along in traffic or crawling along in mud. It's obviously not designed to be a Ferrari, obviously that may seem. But in addition to a very strong, very torquey engine, you've got your selectable wheel drive, which is fairly par for the course in most all-terrain vehicles. You've got a low-range selection for the gearbox, this 8-speed auto. You've also got things like locking differentials front and rear, which can be locked independently, which I know real off-road enthusiasts who like to get unstuck themselves. They take pleasure in actually getting out of tricky situations themselves, as opposed to, say, going into a Land Rover's computer and telling it to help me out. Will really appreciate the fact that they have the tools at their disposal to operate manually to get out of situations. I also really like the detachable sway bar. Now, I didn't do some serious off-roading this week, but earlier in the summer Myself and a colleague actually took this onto a really tough terrain course, and the detachable sway bar was incredibly useful on undulating and sort of chassis twisting terrain to help ensure that all of the wheels touch the ground all of the time to help maximise traction. And of course the vehicle's naturally short overhangs front and rear means that it's got great approach and departure angles for scaling its way up things. Yeah, it's an incredible off-road vehicle, and I think there's no question or shadow of doubt that right now today the Jeep Wrangler Rubicon is the most capable off-road vehicle money can buy. More practical in terms of you may have to persuade the family that you want this as your off-road toy and use it as an everyday vehicle. The good news is that this latest generation Wrangler is more livable day to day than it ever has been before, and by quite some margin over the previous generation. Okay, there's still some tyre roar from those knobbly tyres, and because it has the aerodynamic properties of a brick, there is some wind noise, particularly around this quite upright windscreen. But generally speaking, you can have a conversation without having a raised voice in here. The suspension is not quite as bouncy as it was before. Okay, of course, you throw it into a series of bends too quickly and there's quite a bit of roll, and the steering's a bit woolly, but those are all trade-offs for its off-roading capabilities, because you don't want stiff suspension and super sharp steering whenever you are off-road. It's just not really feasible, not what you'd want, let's put it that way. So yeah, day to day it does pretty well. I've been averaging about 31 miles to the gallon out of the car in sort of mixed motorway and urban driving, which is not too bad, certainly for a vehicle of this size. And yeah, the interior is perfectly pleasant. It's a nice mix between, you know, hard rugged plastics that don't seem quite too cheap, you know, a bit, okay, there's some FCA switchgear in here which maybe could do with trading up on a vehicle that's quite as expensive as this, but generally speaking everything feels very suitable for the sort of vehicle it is. It needs to stand up to the punishment of muddy boots, kicking doors and things like that. Speaking of mud, a nice trait of this vehicle is that there's some one-way valves in the floor that actually allow you to hose out the interior and allow it to drain out should you get coated in mud in here. Centre console, we've got an 8.4 inch touchscreen display. It's FCA's latest unit. It's fine. I mean, the capabilities of it is everything you'd expect. It's got Apple CarPlay and your navigation, and there's actually some nice off-roading tools in there as well for articulation and you know, what selectable drive modes you've got the vehicle in currently, what the diffs are doing, and where the wheels are pointing. But it has frozen on me a couple of times, and it's certainly not the best out there. I love its size, makes it easy to use on the move, but I think generally speaking that there are better units out there. They've caught up considerably from previously, because the last generation FCA units were a bit laughable, to be honest. This much better, but you know, still room for improvement. Seating, you've got that nice high drive position. Of course you do. Look at the size of this thing. It's practically a monster truck. Seeing over the traffic is wonderfully commanding, and actually a little tempting sometimes to just drive off-road whenever there's a lot of traffic. In the back, no worries seating 3 adults. There's plenty of headroom, plenty of leg room, and the floor's actually nice and flat, which is great considering that most off-road vehicles have a big transmission tunnel that runs through the middle of them. Now, the versatility of this car is pretty good as well, because not only do you have a 548 litre cargo capacity in the back via a split folding tailgate and a nice wide opening for oversized cargo, but you can also remove the roof in its entirety on sunnier days, and there's an integrated roll cage, so you can go off-roading safe in the knowledge that you should be okay should the worst happen, but you can have that nice convertible essence to the vehicle, which has been a staple of Jeeps since, well, you know, the Willys Jeep. Another nice thing is that if you decide to go full Daisy Duke, you can take the doors off and have a bit of a dune buggy experience with this vehicle. I haven't been able to do that this week, but I have had a look. It's a handful of bolts per door, and they lift straight off. You probably want a hand lifting them in and out just to prevent damaging them, as opposed to doing it yourself. But yeah, what a cool thing to have. I can totally see this in the summer down at the beach, doors off, roof off. Great sound system in the vehicle as well. Yeah, I think that's going to make you very popular come summertime. Obviously there's going to be a lot of comparisons between this vehicle and, say, a Land Rover Defender, and they both share that same rugged all-terrain ethos. But the difference is that Jeep sort of moved with the times. They added new capabilities to the vehicle. They added just enough, not loads, but just enough creature comforts to make this a usable everyday vehicle, and sort of addressed the things like sharp edges and clunky doors and whatnot that just make things like a Defender to use every day sometimes a bit grating unless you're really, really invested in the Defender lifestyle. And that's where I think the Jeep's been more successful, arguably, than the Defender, because the Defender has needed a ground-up replacement to make it acceptable in today's world for today's buyers, whereas the Jeep has sort of modified its formula and hasn't been ashamed to make changes where the customer wants them, but keep its core values. And I think that's the big thing, and that's what makes me really fall in love with this car, is because it's so committed to what it is. Underneath the heated seats and the touchscreen infotainment system and everything, it is about going anywhere you point the nose of this vehicle. And whilst at about £47,000, this Rubicon in 4-door is pretty pricey, I just can't think of another vehicle like it that has quite so much character and sort of is a 4x4 that does all the all-terrain bits that you want it to and straddles the day-to-day livability in quite such an easy stride. I think Jeep have done a great job.